All right. Hello. Hello. Welcome, LinkedIn Live. This is week 2 of Financial Clarity Live. And today we're here to transform the way you think about your business finances. This isn't just a numbers game, it's about clarity, strategy, and taking control. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to demystify the financial planning process, show you why FP&A matters, and how it can unlock your business's true potential. Together, we're going to cut through the noise, focus on what matters, and arm you with the tools to make smarter and sharper decisions. Think of this as your LinkedIn Live theater, your backstage pass, if you will, to getting actionable insights that are going to fuel growth and future proof your business. Because at the end of the day, financial clarity drives success. Okay, Augie and Phil, let's go ahead and dive in. Sorry here. We are back at the beginning. I know you guys both, we're getting a little bit excited for this week because going off of last week, we really dove into what was going on in FP&A and what was the beginning of it, but we didn't really get to dive into the meat. So we talked about FP&A, unlocking the financial clarity, but this week we're going to talk to the backbone of every business, which is the financial statement. So we're going to make sure we cover the 3 core financial statements. Phil, you're going to lead us on that. Augie, you're going to hopefully help us figure out how to extract insights that drive action. And then both of you and myself, we're going to talk about critical red flags that are maybe hiding in plain sight for all the business owners out there. So let's go ahead and dive in. So with that being said, financial statements right in front of us, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement. This is just a simple, one sentence, maybe able to explain it to your 5th grader about what this tool is and what it's useful for. But I guess I look towards you, Phil, always as our leader on this. When it comes to a business owner starting their financial journey, which one of these 3 or which one of the 3, income statement, balance sheet, or cash flow, do you recommend focusing on first and why?
That's always a trick question, Josh, right? It always depends. But I won't cop out. I used to love to ask this question to people I was in job interviews, so I'll go ahead and answer it. So, we're going to assume this business is just starting out and maybe not as seasoned. So not only is this business owner starting out on their financial journey, but also on their business journey, in that particular circumstance, it's all about how much cash they have and then how long it's going to take to be able to get the cash flow coming in positive. So, from that perspective, you want to be looking at your cash flow statement, which would show you, what's going on with the comings and goings of your actual cash.
Okay. And then touching on the other 2, I guess, how relevant are they when you just start a business?
I mean, the way I always like to put it to describe it to a 5th grader, right, is this is the language of business. So if you don't understand them and how they interplay with one another, it's the equivalent of going to a foreign country and not being able to speak with the locals. So I think it's
okay. Ask me about how I got stuck in the subway in Paris for 9 hours because I didn't know what the word exit was, but not on this episode. And it's sortie for any of you listeners out there. I don't know if I pronounced it right. All right, Augie. So how do these statements, when you're interacting with them, give you a holistic view of the company's financial health? And let's talk about maybe a little bit more of a mature business.
Well, it gives you a different idea based on what you're looking at, a little bit further in the past, more recently to the present. And, some of the things that I encounter are things like maybe software or a service provider that was explored, not necessarily followed through with or integrated into the regular operations, and yet they're still paying a licensing fee, something like that. So there's always some loose change to pick up.
Okay, great. I like that you're relating this to immediate action that can turn to a more profitable business. All right, so we're going to keep it moving because we got 30 minutes total. We've already used up 6 of them. This is the financial roadmap for a lot of our clients, but a lot of them aren't looking at it. And if you were driving me in a car and you weren't willing to look at a map, or more importantly, you were looking at the rear view mirror of that vehicle, I know I would probably make it about a city block before I asked you to pull over and get out. I'm not sure about you guys and your safety level of comfort, but so many business owners we talk to are looking at their checking account in the rearview mirror and making decisions off that, we find that to be pretty dangerous. We'll talk about forecasting in another episode, but let's just look here at financial statements in action. And I guess what are Phil, I'm kind of looking off of the past conversations we've had with so many different clients. What are the most common misconceptions that business owners have when they're interpreting their income statement or their cash flow statement?
It's a good question, Josh, and this is really what we see a lot of. And there's three of them that I think I kind of lump them into the same buckets of confusing their profit with their cash flow, right? Like you'd like to say that the cash is a fact, the profit can a lot of times be an opinion, and this kind of goes hand in hand with overlooking expenses that maybe you exclude from your EBITDA, but for the purpose of talking to a broker, for instance, but are still distorting your vision of what your true total profitability is. And then, a big one is just not understanding the difference between what your P&L may be saying versus the timing of your cash flows, right? So kind of understanding how what's on your P&L and versus your receivables versus your payables and the interplay between those things. Because if you're not, minding the cash flow timing, that can really cause a lot of issues.
Okay. And Augie, looking at you for this one, can you explain maybe an example of how specific entries in these statements highlight an opportunity for cost savings or growth? You kind of tapped into cost savings before, but how about growth?
Growth, I would say there's oftentimes consultation fees or education that's being paid for that, again, might not be getting fully integrated. That could be sort of taken back on board and redeployed in a place that's going to be a lot more valuable and give you a lot more traction.
Yes, love that. So, what I'm going to go with there is that a lot of folks, when they think of finance, they think about savings. To me, that's like, yes, you should think about saving money, but if you're in business, it's not to save money. It's to invest money back into that business, redeploy it into hopefully your business model that is working, and then get a return on that. And so I think that's a common misconception a lot of times, because folks have only interacted with a bookkeeper or with a CPA that they talk to once a year, and they don't really understand fully what is going on in the business. And so they, kind of ask us, well, hey, how much money is it going to save me to have a CFO? And I think my answer out of it bad is it's not going to save you anything because you're going to pay money to have a CFO, but hopefully and strategically having us on board is going to lead you to multiply your revenue and your EBITDA to follow significantly, right? And if you're looking at an exit all the way at the end of the road, you only get to exit once, and every one of those numbers, could be worth millions or tens of millions of dollars, depending on the business model. So that's just a snapshot in here. But as we look at kind of unlocking financial insights, I guess, Phil, how do you help clients identify hidden costs that might be draining their profitability? Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I think the way I always think about that is that what we do is provide a perspective, right? So if you don't have an expectation for what things should be or what you want them to be, and you're not measuring yourself against that, it's often easy to overlook things. So what we do by virtue of implementing our process is to be able to give our clients the perspective and the expectation of, if you do all these things, I achieve my goals, and then we help them measure against whether or not we're hitting those milestones and achieving those targets. And then what comes along with that is things like we were expecting to spend 100 grand this month, it was 110 because, like Augie was alluding to, someone forgot to shut off whatever subscription or whatever it was, and we got dinged against what we thought was going to happen. And those are the types of actionable insights that we can then turn back to the team and figure out where the breakdowns in the process are, kind of coming to light by virtue of just making sure we're keeping a close eye on the comings and goings of our cash and our expenses and payables.
Phil, I like that you tapped into the team. Next week, we're going to be going into that and talking about the team, the financial operations team, and specifically how to get away from finger pointing. We run into this a lot, especially when there's maybe a team member that's outsourced or part-time and they're not as ingrained in the overall operations. You're passing this production line of the financials, whether it be, bookkeeping all the way through to forecasting, whether you have reporting to investor relations, whatever the sequence is, depending on the maturity of the business model. And, a lot of times what ends up happening is there's this kind of mark where the business owner is going to look at the financials on a certain day. And if the team doesn't close the books and report correctly, the business owner shows up, they're kind of given a bucket of excuses of why the numbers aren't exactly accurate. And we're missing this one piece. And then everybody kind of looks at their toes and points at somebody else in the room. Kind of reminds me of like, elementary school or something when there was a funny noise. And, it's like, that is not how you're going to drive the business forward, is by everybody showing up with an excuse and then pointing that way for whose fault it was. So I think, Phil, as we get into this a little bit more today, let's start to shape out how these different components, who they're owned by, as far as the responsibility of the inputs to the outputs. And then next week we'll clean that up and be talking with a controller and bookkeeper and how those pieces might fit together. But Augie, one more before we jump to the next slide. When you spot red flags, either through ratios or cash flow issues, what steps should a business owner do to address these proactively? Like if it gets to the stage where the analyst is pulling them up and saying, hey, you might want to take a look at this ratio, it's getting out of whack, or this number is not where it was last quarter. How does that end up playing out in the conversations with the business owners?
Well, we have regular meetings, and so people are expecting to get those kinds of updates. And, you can't take action on something you're unaware of. So once you see it clearly that there's something that can very easily impact your business in a beneficial way if you just address it, it's usually, a few minor decisions downstream from being implemented.
Yes. So removing the guilt of what you haven't already done because you, like you said, were not aware, you did not know, and saying, okay, great, we just learned we spent an extra $5,000 this month on software we didn't need, or payroll overran because we didn't keep a close eye on overtime, and the way we were doing scheduling led to 30% of the hours being overtime, whereas if we would have got ahead of this and hired up, maybe nearly all of that could have been eliminated by just doing different shift strategies with regards to the labor force. So these are all examples of real world business applications. But to your point, Augie, what you don't know will affect your financial situation until you understand that. And so taking a look at this, creating that cadence, that's what this is all about. So as we move towards the unlocking of the financial insights, and specifically, we want to keep this real world focused. Phil, you got a retail case study about how critical financial discipline is in managing inventory to improve cash flow. Can you give an example? It's holiday season. Everybody's thinking about buying stuff. I got a brother that helps out in the retail space with a big shop in New York City. What do you think of if you're applying this to that specific case study of how financial discipline that can be unlocked by the insights of looking at the financial statements can allow that business to improve, if not immediately, maybe at the same seasonal time next year?
Yeah, sure. What I was alluding to earlier, and it's specifically important in the retail industry, right? And cash flow timing is everything, and being able to make sure you manage inventory and expectations of how much of that inventory you're going to be needing and when you're going to be needing it is super important, right? And the history, we always say, the past doesn't always predict the future, but it often rhymes. And if you understand the seasonality of your business, if you understand what's going on with your marketing and where your customers are and where they're coming from, you're just in a better position to manage your inventory more effectively, make sure you don't run out of stock, right? You don't overstock, and you don't, most importantly, run out of money before you can pay for all that inventory that you're going to turn around and sell, right? So the timing of the cash flow is super important, and without a system to manage these comings and goings, you're kind of flying blind with regard to maximizing your potential opportunities, right? Like you alluded to, a lot of businesses thrive off of the money they make within the next 8 weeks. So if you're not really poised and ready to go, you got 12 months to wait before you're back in your peak season. So you don't want to be missing those opportunities. They come once a year.
In that business, they do. And to your point, you know, you need to be out ahead of this and understand these trends, because in an example where, you know, 50% almost of this is being bought or more online, you usually are running some form of ads. Not that you weren't doing this in the physical sense, but now it's even that much more important. This time of the year, the price of ads spikes. So you got to have your budget prepared. You got to have access to a line of capital if that's what you're growing off of. And, you know, if you don't hit that window, you know, in a seasonal business like retail, you might have missed it. So let's talk about a different business model. Augie, looking at you to think about maybe a service business that's out there, small business, you know, service business. What tools or analysis would you recommend to uncover growth potential from the balance sheet for that small service business?
So at Sustain, we use a suite of cloud-based applications that communicate with one another and allow us to see different versions of the same information, different slices and dices of the same overall pie. And it really takes some things that if you were just going the old fashioned way from Excel sheet, spreadsheet back and forth, now you just see it and just visually, intuitively, you understand what's going on with a certain metric in your business. And service business, I think specifically, because there's not the same level of inventory tracking, it can be difficult to ensure that deliverables are arriving on time. And I think some of the tools that we use, like a platform like Giraffe, even something as simple as QuickBooks, especially when you tie them together, now you can automatically, at a glimpse, see what's going on with whatever particular metric you're interested at the moment.
Right. So, you know, thinking about service business, it's a industry I've been in myself for one way or shape or form for about 20 years. I used to own a business in the energy efficiency space. We worked a lot with HVAC contractors as well as the other trades, and just a fun one that everybody's heard of. So I heard that everybody calls it Black Friday. The plumbers call it Brown Friday. We won't get into details on why, but that inventory that they have, right, is really their capacity, right, to go service the jobs that they know they're going to get called, because everybody's eating at the same time with way more people than the house is built for. So what you're saying is, like, if they have additional capacity, they would be thinking about unlocking it for these peak seasons. Is that they need to basically?
Yeah, obviously the first key would be knowing that you have that additional capacity, and if you're not really drilling down into the weeds often enough, it's easy for that kind of thing to go by the wayside. And that's one of the things is it's often the low hanging fruit that it's much appreciated because it's so easy to take action on it and reap a decent reward right away.
Right. Like telling your team, that's like, hey, let's not take off the day after Thanksgiving. Matter of fact, let's bring in sub work if we can, and then I'll give everybody, you know, more time off downstream when we have less utilization of our resources. In a service business, that's really what you've got to play with. I know we used to do something similar to that around the winter time, when that first winter cold snap would hit. Everybody would start thinking about fixing their homes, you know, energy situation, and you know, making sure that we had max capacity. Even if we had to pay overtime, it was worth it because we had already measured that to figure out what was the extra margin we were going to have if we could just get one more job per truck that was already rolling. Cool stuff here. So keeping it moving, we kind of went into a couple real world applications here. We talked about a retail business. We talked about a service business, but you know, I guess, can you guys give any other insights? Maybe just go back into your brain, keep the names anonymous. And over the past 90 days, Phil, what's an example of maybe some clarity, like that lightning strike moment where an owner that you were working with in a live session, like they finally kind of clicked around, oh, this is how these statements relate to my situation, and now I can make this decision?
Okay. I can tell you a funny story. I think maybe some of the folks who are a little into this will laugh at where I got a call from a client once who there's like, Phil, there's something wrong. My assets and my liabilities and equities they're the same number on my balance sheet, and it's kind of one of those funny that's the nature of your balance sheet. They're supposed to balance on one side and the other, and so it's just one of those super smart guy, and just you don't know what you don't know, and it's always good to appreciate that. It's kind of understanding the basic fundamentals of what's going on here, and it could even be as simple as one of those operations. It's like, oh, okay, so if they're always staying in balance, that means if I'm moving something over here, then I'm moving it over there as well, and getting the fundamental understanding of the mechanics of how these things talk to each other, will just again help you speak that language of business better, and being able to read what the tea leaves are telling you.
That's a good one. I had one that popped up pretty recently as well. It's end of the year. Good friend of mine who is a client of ours and has been growing a gigantic development, multiple billions of dollars of real estate development, but also as a consulting firm with makes a couple $100,000 a year. And he's looking at it, his P&L, and he's like, dude, I don't know how I made all this money. I need help tax planning. I said, well, we're not tax planners. Your CPA can help with that, but let's jump in, take a quick look. I'm on Zoom with him anyways. And we pull it up, and I'm like, first, before we jump into this, where do you think you stand for last month as far as, getting your bookkeeping, put away all your reconciliations done? He's like, oh, it's taken care of. My admin knocked all that out in the first week. And I'm like, okay, well, let me pull this up on the screen. I'm like, I need you to be able to see this. There's 25 open transactions here, 15 over here on the credit card. This account that links to QuickBooks broke. So unfortunately, you don't have all the information in. So we went through that exercise, took like 7 minutes, put everything away. And it was like, oh, I'm only going to make $10,000 for the year. That makes more sense because I didn't have any extra cash that I was like trying to figure out where that went. So inputs are important first chronologically before the outputs. And before you start reading the financial statements, you got to make sure that your financial operations are tight. We're not bookkeepers, but we know plenty of good ones. But if that is a problem that you're having, that, where the financial statements literally do not make sense, you got to start with the fundamentals. How about you, Augie? Any examples of the past 90 days that kind of pop into your mind of that clarity that hits a business owner because they're paying attention?
Might even be the same client, but yeah, definitely have seen essentially the gears turning and the light bulb click in several instances recently, where a customer has a fairly complicated like internal bookkeeping structure that is sort of custom and personalized and doesn't necessarily play by the rules. And we come in, we try to untangle that and describe it in the standardized way. And once they sort of see how their own internal tracking metrics overlay on the industry standards, you can see that they start to get very excited and see the potential in analyzing your data this way.
Yes. Okay. Awesome, guys. Well, look, time flies when you're having fun talking about finance. We're 25 minutes in. We got 5 minutes left. I'm going to keep us moving right towards the audience, seeking some clarity. Phil, we've got Emily R. out there. She owns a vibrant marketing company. She wants to know, Phil, as someone who runs a marketing agency, what are the top cash flow pitfalls you see in service-based businesses?
Top cash flow pitfalls in service-based businesses. Yeah, I mean, the one that seems kind of obvious, but maybe it isn't, is being really persistent about your receivables and making sure you collect your outstanding, contracted amounts. I've run into some issues recently where, some good proactive, AR follow-ups, save a lot of cash flow timing issues. So I think that's usually the biggest problem is creating long cash flow cycles for yourself and losing track and not making sure that your clients have a real easy to follow process to make sure you get paid, right? You want to make sure you're paying yourself as simple as possible, getting paid as simple as possible. So I think that's what I see a lot of is they make that process too complex and take too long, and then just that creates you're kind of fighting uphill and fighting upstream, against the bills that are constantly continuing to come on schedule. If you're not getting paid on time as well, that creates an issue.
And then, Augie, you already hit on this one, over investing in tools or platforms that don't yield ROI or you're just simply not using. And then we already hit on also the lack of the cash buffer for the seasonality or client delays. So those three, I mean, it's all, we're talking cash. Okay, we got James P. He's a co-founder of an ironclad manufacturing company. Okay, Augie, we've seen our accounts receivable grow substantially. What's the best way to balance client relationships while tightening payment terms?
I would say there's multiple approaches, but it's more about as you develop and get a better idea of what your target is and what you're best at delivering, sort of having a touching base and redefining the parameters in terms of expectation and in terms of specialty.
Okay. So we're talking what, setting clear terms up front and enforcing them, like starting with that. You have to, if you tell them like this is what it's going to be, you have to enforce it. Otherwise your word turns to mud. We've also seen, especially in manufacturing, you can create some discounts, early payment discounts to incentivize faster pay. And then the last one that kind of pops into my mind, I've danced with the devil myself in a past experience, is using financing options like factoring. Now, obviously, this is only if necessary, and you better read the terms and understand it, because you can basically end up in a stuck position where the financier effectively owns your cash flow and supply chain. So don't do that lightly. But if there is no other way to grow and hit the growth metrics, and the purchase orders are coming in, that is a way to get there. All right, we'll go last question from the audience. There's a bunch, but Rachel C., who is the CEO of a evergreen wellness product business, says, for both you, I think she's talking to you guys, what's a quick way to identify if my company is growing profitably or just growing? Phil, you go.
I started with one of these, my favorite interview questions to start. I'll bring it back around to that. I used to love to ask it, if my profitability declined year over year, can I still be profitable, right? Is it still possible even though it's going down? And it's just one of those, just kind of thinking through. Well, it depends, right? And if I wasn't profitable before and I'm making less, that's a bad thing. Or if I was profitable before but I'm a little less profitable, I'm still profitable even though it's declining. But I think it kind of speaks to this idea of your margins and where those are at, and understanding that, for every incremental dollar you're making, how much of that are you keeping? And you kind of reach this point of diminishing returns where, I think you kind of find that sweet spot where you're not necessarily just making extra profit, but not keeping any of it. You're trying to make sure you maintain some level of, profitability, some level of margin. So that would be a good metric to focus on.
All right, awesome. So for those of you guys listening out there, please share questions and thoughts live on the platform. We'll make sure to follow up. You can also DM your questions to me, Josh Notes, or use the Financial Clarity Live hashtag to find the next event, which, speaking of that, it'll be next Wednesday. We're going to shift the time a little bit to meet our guests where they need to meet us, which is 1 p.m. Eastern. And the next week's topic is going to be diving into financial roles and responsibilities. So the key takeaways for today was getting that financial clarity, understanding statements, and really the language of business is crucial for the business success. Starting simple, focusing on insights from each statement and how they fit together. And then, we talked about progress and development and our clients accelerating because of this information, this clarity over time. So it's not about perfection, it's about progress. Obviously, that's kind of a life message, but works out in finance too. Cool little visual we got here, and we've been saying it for a while. We appreciate our friends over there in the robot land that helped us turn it into a nice spot that looks like Augie would love to skate this one day. But your financial statements tell the true story of your business. Numbers don't tend to lie. People tend to. So learn to read them fluently and unlock the insights to propel your business forward. And then, like we said last slide, we're going to be next week, 1 p.m. talking about a business owner, a CFO, and a controller. You can guess who 2 out of 3 of those are. Going to walk into a bar. What's going to happen next? And we're gonna have some fun with teaming up to stop the financial finger pointing. So with that being said, we're a minute over. I want to thank our guest, Augie Manzella, our financial analyst, Phil Maffey, our CFO, for joining us, leading the conversation. I am Josh Notes. This was Financial Clarity Live. Thank you, and see you next week.